Beneath Arizona's endless blue skies, darkness was quietly taking shape. A fender bender that ended in gunfire on a Tempe street. A body dragged into a blood-stained bathroom in Phoenix. A husband poisoned sip by sip in his morning coffee. A lover shot inside his own garage. Each scene is brutal, each killer bound by obsession, rage, or decades behind bars. But what becomes of the innocent people who have passed away? Inside Arizona's most dangerous female killers. Shocking murders and true crime documentary. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Holly Davis. It began with a sound most drivers know too well, a sudden collision, a jolt of metal against metal, but what followed on that January day in 2016 would shock both America and China. In the city of Tempe, Arizona, 19-year-old Jiang Yue, a bright Chinese exchange student at Arizona State University, sat behind the wheel of her Mercedes at a red light. Behind her, 32-year-old Holly Davis idled in a Volkswagen Passat. Moments later, Davis's car slammed into Jiang's from behind. It seemed like a minor fender bender until she stepped out holding a gun. Jiang's boyfriend, who had been in the passenger seat, later told investigators that he got out to check the damage but froze when he saw Davis pointing a firearm at him. He quickly returned to the car, shouting for Jiang to lock the doors. Before she could, Davis approached, raised her weapon, and fired multiple rounds through the driver's side window. Bullets tore through the glass and into Jiang's torso. Panicking, she tried to escape, turning the wheel sharply and speeding into oncoming traffic. Her car collided with another vehicle, injuring 6 people. Jiang was rushed to a nearby hospital but died from her wounds. Holly Davis fled the scene. The following day, police tracked Davis to her apartment in Mesa. Officers found she had tried to hide the murder weapon beneath her car and washed her clothes to erase gunshot residue. According to court records, she admitted to using oxycodone and struggling with depression. Investigators later found a handwritten note suggesting she had been planning violence. Prosecutors charged Davis with first-degree murder, describing the killing as monstrous and senseless. Judge Warren Granville echoed that sentiment, calling it a moment of cruelty that defied reason. During trial, Davis's defense argued she suffered from addiction and emotional instability, claiming she wanted police to kill her. Still, the brutality of the act left little room for sympathy. In June 2018, Davis accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder. The court sentenced her to 25 years in state prison, the maximum penalty under the agreement. She showed no emotion as the verdict was read. The victim's family, who had flown from China, called the outcome a miscarriage of justice. "She murdered our daughter and gets to live," said Jiang's father, his voice breaking. Jiang's cousin, Kathryn Sinkevitch, spoke outside the courthouse. "She's a monster. My cousin's life was worth more than a plea bargain." The case drew international attention, prompting protests and a petition that gathered over 10,000 signatures demanding harsher punishment. The Chinese consulate and ASU officials publicly supported Jiang's family, turning the case into a symbol of grief and outrage across borders. From this tragedy, the lessons remain stark: never let rage follow you behind the wheel. Addiction, untreated, becomes its own weapon, and justice, though served, can still feel hollow when life is lost. Some collisions end with bent metal and insurance claims. This one ended with silence, and a mother's cry that still echoes across 2 continents. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Nadine Chavez. Mercedes Gomez, Christina Gomez, and Melissa Servin. It started with a voice echoing through a quiet Arizona neighborhood, someone screaming for help, pleading for someone to call 911. In March 2020, 34-year-old Melissa Valenzuela, a mother of 3 from Mesa, Arizona, vanished after spending time with 4 women she knew. Nadine Chavez, 34. Mercedes Gomez, 32. Christina Gomez, 39, and Melissa Servin, 42. Days later, her name would appear in police bulletins and news alerts across the state, another missing woman whose final hours would reveal a chilling portrait of betrayal and violence. On March 17, witnesses reported seeing 4 women arguing with someone matching Valenzuela's description near a house on Hadley Street in Phoenix. According to court records, several bystanders saw the woman being pushed and dragged toward the residence as she screamed for help. She was terrified, one neighbor told police. They just forced her inside. Inside the home, investigators believe a violent struggle took place. Blood was later found in the bathroom, and pieces of floor tile were missing. Chavez's brother told detectives that he visited the house that night and again the next morning, each time noticing more signs that something was wrong. He said Chavez later confessed that the victim had been brought to the house, beaten during an argument, and killed. The following day, the bathroom was cleaned, and the women were seen scrubbing the floors and front walkway. When police executed a search warrant on April 24, forensic teams confirmed traces of blood throughout the home. They also discovered that Mercedes Gomez had given Chavez's brother the victim's debit card and PIN the morning after the attack, a detail prosecutors said tied them directly to the crime. Valenzuela's body was found days later, on March 23, officially ruled a homicide. Although the exact cause of death was not disclosed, investigators cited blunt force trauma as a likely factor. All 4 suspects were arrested and charged with felony kidnapping. Each was booked into Maricopa County Jail, held on $50,000 bond. At the time of their first court appearances, none had entered a plea, and the homicide investigation remained open. Prosecutors told reporters, "The evidence inside that home tells a story the suspects can't erase." Valenzuela's family described her as a loving mother whose world revolved around her 3 sons. She'll never see them graduate, never meet her grandchildren, her sister, Jessica Valenzuela, said tearfully. The family thanked Mesa police for their persistence, saying the arrests brought one step closer to justice, but added, "True justice comes when every person involved tells the truth." For the community, the case was both heartbreaking and cautionary, a reminder of how quickly trust can turn fatal. From this tragedy, 3 truths stand clear. Danger often hides behind familiar faces. Silence among witnesses prolongs violence, and no friendship is worth ignoring the signs of fear. Melissa Valenzuela's story is not just about how she died, but about how no one should ever vanish unheard, in plain sight. Number 3. Jordan Spalding. It began as an ordinary ride through South Phoenix. But within minutes, it turned into one of Arizona's most shocking killings caught on camera. 31-year-old Jordan Spalding had ordered a medical rideshare to take her to an appointment. Behind the wheel was 74-year-old Samuel Webster, a retired Air Force veteran and respiratory therapist who drove part-time for the company Veo. The two had never met before that day. What should have been a 10-minute drive became a fatal encounter that left a respected man dead and a troubled woman charged with second-degree murder. At around 5:15 p.m. on the 21st of January 2025, the ride began smoothly. But witnesses said Spalding and Webster soon began arguing. Moments later, the vehicle pulled to the side of the road near a canal at 40th Street and Baseline. Both got out, their dispute growing louder. Then, in a sudden and violent turn, Spalding climbed into the driver's seat of Webster's SUV. Witnesses reported hearing Webster plead, "Why are you doing this?" before the vehicle lunged forward. Surveillance video later showed Spalding running him over, once, then reversing, and striking him again. She circled the car, accelerating and braking repeatedly as Webster tried to crawl away. When officers arrived, they found Webster lying on the ground with catastrophic injuries. Paramedics rushed him to a nearby hospital, but he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The level of brutality was hard to process, one officer said. "It wasn't an accident, it was deliberate." Spalding was arrested later that evening. According to the police report, she told detectives she had taken fentanyl earlier that day and was self-medicating. She claimed Webster had tried to assault her during the ride, but investigators quickly determined there was no evidence of attempted rape or struggle. Her statements didn't match physical evidence or witness accounts. Court documents revealed a history of instability. Spalding had multiple active warrants across Phoenix, Mesa, and Tempe, ranging from assault on a police officer to burglary and car theft. She admitted she hadn't taken her prescribed medication for borderline personality disorder. During her first court appearance, Spalding appeared disoriented and argumentative. When the judge set her bond at $1 million, she protested, asking why it was so high. Outside the courtroom, the victim's son, Samuel Webster Jr., told reporters, "My father was a man of faith. As a family, we forgive her. But forgiveness doesn't erase what she did." The case stunned Phoenix residents and reignited conversations about untreated addiction, mental illness, and safety within rideshare programs for both passengers and drivers. From this tragedy, the warnings are painfully clear. Untreated addiction clouds judgment beyond repair. Unchecked mental illness can turn confusion into catastrophe, and rage behind the wheel transforms an argument into irreversible loss. Some rides end with a destination. This one ended with a plea for mercy, drowned beneath the roar of an engine. Number 4. Elizabeth Archibeque. It began behind a closed door in a quiet Flagstaff apartment, a door that hid more than a secret. In March 2020, police in northern Arizona responded to a 911 call from a grandmother who said her 6-year-old grandson wasn't breathing. Inside the small apartment, officers found a scene that would haunt even seasoned investigators. The boy, later identified as Deshaun Martinez, weighed only 18 pounds, roughly the size of a 1-year-old. His body was skeletal, his face completely sunken. Paramedics tried to save him, but it was too late. Deshaun's mother, Elizabeth Archibeque, then 26, told police her son had medical issues. But detectives quickly realized the truth was far darker. For more than a month, Deshaun and his 7-year-old brother had been locked in a closet, measuring just 21 by 25 inches. They were kept there up to 16 hours a day, given barely enough food to survive, oatmeal at noon, a cheese sandwich 4 hours later, and nothing after 4 p.m. According to court records, Archibeque and her husband, Anthony Martinez, claimed the children were being punished for stealing food at night. When investigators opened the closet, they found it lined with plastic, the air thick with the smell of urine. A detective testified, "I've never seen anything so horrific in my career." The surviving brother, weighing just 28 pounds, was hospitalized. 2 younger sisters, aged 2 and 4, were found healthy, but taken into protective custody. During questioning, Archibeque confessed the abuse had been ongoing, saying she felt powerless under the control of her husband and mother-in-law. Her defense later revealed she had been addicted to methamphetamine from birth and suffered long-term trauma. In 2023, 3 years after Deshaun's death, Archibeque appeared before Judge Ted Reed in Coconino County Superior Court. Dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit, she stared at the floor as the judge read the charges: first-degree murder and child abuse. She pleaded guilty, admitting responsibility for the starvation and confinement that led to her son's death. Her attorney, Christine Brown, urged the court to consider her client's history of abuse and mental illness, saying Archibeque was born into chaos and never escaped it. But the judge rejected leniency, calling her behavior heinous, cruel, and depraved. He sentenced her to life in prison without parole. At sentencing, Archibeque wept, saying, "A huge part of me died with my beautiful child. Not a day goes by that I don't grieve." The case shocked Arizona and reignited scrutiny of the state's Department of Child Safety, which had previously received abuse reports about the family in 2013. A neighbor, Leslie Lerma, summed up the community's anguish. "That little boy suffered. I'm not going to sleep well tonight." From this tragedy, 3 lessons remain painfully clear. Unchecked abuse festers in silence. Trauma cannot excuse cruelty, and every report of neglect must be taken seriously before another child's life fades away unseen. Behind every closed door, a child's cry could be the last chance for someone to listen. Number 5. Mae Blessing. It began on a quiet Monday morning in Fountain Hills, Arizona, inside a home where love and resentment had quietly shared the same walls. At 92 years old, Mae Blessing was frail, widowed, and living with her son, Thomas Blessing, and his girlfriend. She had moved in 6 months earlier, dependent on her son's care but increasingly angry over his plan to move her into an assisted living facility. To Anna, that decision wasn't kindness, it was betrayal. For days, she told detectives later, she couldn't sleep, thinking only of one thing: "You ended my life, so I'm taking yours." On the morning of the 2nd of July 2018, around 10 a.m., she slipped 2 pistols, one bought in the 1972, another inherited from her late husband, into the pockets of her robe. She wheeled herself down the hallway to her son's bedroom. Inside, Thomas, 72, stood next to his girlfriend. Without warning, Anna raised the first gun and fired twice. The bullet struck her son in the neck and jaw. He collapsed instantly. According to police reports, she then turned the weapon toward his girlfriend, who screamed and lunged at her. A violent struggle followed as the younger woman disarmed Anna, knocking the gun to the floor. But before she could flee, the elderly woman reached for her second pistol. Again, the girlfriend fought her off, wrenching it from her hand and running to call 911. When Maricopa County deputies arrived, They found Anna sitting calmly in a recliner, her hands resting on her lap. She did not resist arrest. "I killed my own son," she said softly, checking his pulse before officers led her away. Later, she added, "He promised I'd never go home. I couldn't forgive him for breaking that." Investigators confirmed she had been contemplating the shooting for several days, a deliberate, premeditated act. They found both pistols loaded. When brought before a judge, Anna appeared in a wheelchair, frail but lucid. She was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated assault, and kidnapping. Her bond was set at $500,000. Her attorney, Ulysses Farragut, described her as a woman in pain, physically and emotionally. Public reaction was mixed: shock, sorrow, disbelief. Sheriff's deputies called it an odd and tragic case, while national media dubbed it one of Arizona's most chilling family crimes. To some, she was a murderer; to others, a symbol of despair among aging Americans fearful of being forgotten. Before trial could begin, Anna suffered a stroke and was moved to hospice care. She died in January 2019. The murder charge was dismissed posthumously. Her son's girlfriend never returned to that home. In a tearful 911 call replayed in court, she cried, "Help me, she's going to shoot me." Words that still echo in true crime archives across YouTube and major news outlets. From this tragedy come hard lessons. Unchecked resentment festers into violence. Elder care demands empathy, not fear, and silence in families can turn into irreversible loss. Sometimes, love doesn't fade, it fractures quietly until the breaking point pulls the trigger. Number 6. Melody Felicano Johnson. It began with a cup of coffee, a bitter taste that would unravel a secret months in the making. In March 2023, U.S. Air Force member Roby Johnson, stationed in Germany, noticed something off in his morning brew. The flavor was sharp, chemical, wrong. His wife, Melody Felicano Johnson, a 39-year-old woman from Tucson, Arizona, brushed it off. But the taste lingered. Suspicion took root. Weeks later, Roby bought pool chemical testing strips and dipped one into the leftover coffee. The strip turned dark, high chlorine levels. What should have been comfort was poison. Instead of confronting her, Roby played along, pretending to drink the coffee while quietly setting up a hidden camera in their kitchen. The footage told the truth. Melody, calm and deliberate, poured a clear liquid from a bleach bottle into the coffee pot. Roby waited, documenting every step. "I had to act normal," he later told investigators, "because if she knew, I wouldn't survive the next cup." When the couple returned to the U.S. that summer and settled in temporary housing near Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Roby set up cameras again, this time disguised as smoke detectors. Within days, they captured Melody repeating the act. On the 18th of July 2023, she was arrested after her husband presented the footage to Tucson police. Investigators said Melody confessed to adding small amounts of bleach into Roby's coffee on July 11 and July 18, admitting it wasn't the first time. Her motive, according to police reports, was financial. Roby believed she wanted to collect his military death benefits once he was gone. At her court appearance, Melody sat silently, dressed in prison beige, her expression blank as the prosecutor played clips of her crime frame by frame. Judge Javier Chan Lopez called her actions a calculated pattern of deceit. Initially charged with attempted first-degree murder, she later pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts of adding poison to food or drink under a plea deal. Her husband's testimony changed everything. Roby told the court he didn't want her imprisoned. "We have a child," he said quietly. "I just want this to end." Because of his statement and her nearly 1 year in custody without bond, the judge sentenced Melody to 3 years of probation with mandatory mental health treatment instead of prison time. When the sentence was read, Melody showed no emotion. Reporters noted the absence of remorse, the stillness of someone who once planned murder through morning routine. The case ignited headlines across YouTube and national news. Arizona wife caught poisoning husband's coffee on camera, sparking debates about domestic manipulation, silent abuse, and digital surveillance in modern marriages. From this chilling story emerge urgent lessons. Evil rarely announces itself, it hides in daily rituals. Technology can expose what trust conceals, and silence, in the face of fear, can cost more than courage ever would. Even in the smallest cup, betrayal can leave the deadliest aftertaste. Number 7. Mary Jo Bailey. It started with a phone call no one thought twice about. just a woman asking what time another left for work. But that single question would unravel a murder 4 decades in the making. In December 1985, Mary Jo Bailey, then known as Mary Jo Lunsman, was a 42-year-old Wisconsin horse enthusiast entangled in a love triangle that would end in blood. Her romantic rival, Yvonne Menke, 45, was a mother of 4 and the woman who had captured the affection of the same man, Jack Owen. When Yvonne gave Owen an ultimatum, end all contact with Mary Jo or end the relationship, jealousy began to boil into rage. Just before dawn on December 12, 1985, Menke stepped outside her apartment to warm her car before work. She never made it back inside. Hidden in the shadows of the stairwell, prosecutors later said, Bailey waited with a gun. Moments later, neighbors heard 3 sharp cracks cut through the cold air. Menke was shot once in the neck and twice in the back of the head. Her body was found at the bottom of the stairs, the snow around her painted red. Investigators recovered a boot print marked Arctic near her body. The next day, police seized a pair of Arctic Cat snowmobile boots, size 5, from Bailey's home. The tread pattern matched perfectly. In her purse, Menke had a note describing Bailey's car, proof she feared her. But in 1985, the case went cold. Without DNA or a confession, prosecutors couldn't make it stick. The file gathered dust for nearly 40 years, until 2021, when Wisconsin cold case detectives reopened the investigation. New witnesses came forward, including a man who recalled Bailey asking him to burn a set of clothes a year after the murder. It was the missing piece they needed. In November 2023, Bailey, then 80 years old and living quietly in Arizona, was arrested. She was extradited to Wisconsin to face trial. During her 2024 court appearances, she sat in a wheelchair, silent, emotionless. Her defense called the case rumor and innuendo, pointing out the lack of modern forensic evidence. But the jury took less than 2 hours to convict her of first-degree murder. On the 2nd of July 2024, Judge Scott Nordstrand sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years, bound by the state law in effect at the time of the crime. It was brutal. It was cold-blooded, he said, adding that if modern sentencing applied, she would never leave prison. During sentencing, Yvonne's daughter, Julie Connors, addressed the court through tears. You sentenced us to a life of pain, sadness, and guilt. You stole my mother. The verdict closed one of Wisconsin's oldest cold cases. Reporters called it justice delayed, but not denied. From this tragedy, haunting lessons emerge. Jealousy, when unchecked, corrodes judgment. Silence protects no one in the face of obsession, and time may fade memories, but it never erases truth. Even after 40 winters, justice still remembers its way home. Number 8. Kathryn Sinkevitch. It began with 3 words heard over a phone line, "Holy SH," followed by 3 deafening booms. What happened next would shatter a family and define one of Arizona's most shocking custody-related murders. Kathryn Sinkevitch, a 31-year-old woman from Tempe, had once shared a home and a future with Michael Agutter, a 31-year-old Wells Fargo employee. The two met online in 2013 and later welcomed a son. But by 2016, the relationship had turned violent and controlling. Michael moved out, filed a protection order, and sought legal custody of their infant son. Prosecutors later described Kathryn as a woman determined to keep Michael out of the child's life at any cost. On the 16th of December 2016, the day Michael took a court-ordered paternity test, Kathryn put her plan into motion. Surveillance footage showed her leaving her Tempe office just minutes after her coworker's white minivan, the one she had secretly taken keys to, pulled away from the lot. She had also stolen license plates, searched how to make her phone untraceable, and turned it off during the critical hours. At 2 p.m., Michael arrived home to his Maricopa garage, still on the phone with his sister. She later testified she heard him say "Holy SH" before the call went silent. Within 11 seconds, a figure dressed entirely in black sprinted across the driveway, fired 3 shots, and fled. When officers arrived, they found Michael slumped in his Lexus, the car still running, 2 bullets lodged in his head and back. Detectives recovered 3 shell casings, a partial shoe print, and surveillance footage showing the white van parked nearby before the ambush. Hours later, the same van returned to the workplace. Sinkevitch walked in 1 minute afterward, expressionless. When told of Michael's death, she immediately asked for a lawyer. 4 days later, she was arrested after fleeing with the baby and hiding at a friend's home. The evidence was damning: stolen plates, gunpowder residue on a hoodie, and video showing her movements. Prosecutors called it an execution. The defense insisted it was circumstantial. But in May 2019, a Pinal County jury took just 1 day to convict her of premeditated first-degree murder. During sentencing, Michael's father called it one of the most cowardly acts imaginable. His sister, who had been on the phone during the murder, broke down in court. "I heard my brother's final breath. No family should live with that sound." Judge Kevin White handed down the state's harshest punishment, short of death, natural life in prison, with no possibility of parole. As she sat in court, motionless, the mother of Michael's child showed no reaction. Outside, the family said simply, "Domestic violence knows no boundaries." From this tragedy, the lessons are unmistakable: never dismiss escalating threats in custody disputes. Legal protection means little without physical safety, and emotional control is the first line of self-defense against violence born of obsession. Love may fade, but when anger replaces it, it can end a life in seconds. Number 9. Jodi Arias. It began with a camera click, a flash, and a scream that would echo through America's true crime history. In 2008, Jodi Arias, a 27-year-old aspiring photographer from California, drove silently through the desert toward Mesa, Arizona. Behind her soft voice and polite smile hid an obsession that had consumed her life. One centered on Chavez, a 30-year-old motivational speaker and devout Mormon. The two had met through work at prepaid legal services, falling into a passionate relationship that quickly soured. Friends described Arias as possessive, jealous, and always watching. On the 4th of June 2008, Alexander welcomed Arias back into his home one final time. That afternoon, they took a series of intimate photographs, images timestamped between 1 and 5:29 p.m. But within minutes of the final photo, the scene turned from sensual to savage. Prosecutors said Arias attacked as Alexander showered. The medical examiner later revealed he had been stabbed 27 times, his throat slit ear to ear, and shot in the head. This was personal. This was rage, a detective recalled. A damaged digital camera, discovered in the washing machine, told the story she tried to erase. The final image of Travis alive, standing in the shower, was followed by blurred photos, the camera falling during the attack. Days later, friends entered his Mesa home after he missed a trip to Cancun. They found him crumpled in the shower, nearly unrecognizable. A bloody palm print containing DNA from both Arias and Alexander sealed her fate. Arrested a month later in California, she first denied knowing anything. Then she blamed masked intruders. Finally, she claimed self-defense. The 2013 trial became a media phenomenon, broadcast live, dissected online, and watched by millions. Prosecutor Juan Martinez painted her as a calculating liar who butchered a man for rejecting her. The defense countered with claims of abuse and trauma, presenting Arias as a victim of manipulation. She testified for 18 days, a rare move for a defendant, and at one point told the jury, "No jury will convict me, you can mark my words." They did. On the 8th of May 2013, she was found guilty of premeditated first-degree murder. Jurors described her demeanor as cold, emotionless, rehearsed. The crime was ruled especially cruel, qualifying her for the death penalty, but two juries deadlocked during sentencing. In 2015, Judge Sherry Stevens sentenced her to life in prison without parole. Outside, crowds erupted in cheers as Alexander's family wept. His sister Tanisha said, "Stop murdering my brother again and again by smearing his name." The Arias case reshaped discussions on trial by media, prosecutorial ethics, and domestic violence narratives, drawing millions of views across YouTube and true crime platforms. From this tragedy emerged three timeless warnings: obsession disguised as love is lethal, control masquerading as devotion destroys lives, and digital evidence, no matter how hidden, never truly disappears. In the end, Jodi Arias' camera captured more than an image, it immortalized the face of betrayal itself. Number 10. Lynandra Walton. It started as an ordinary morning in Phoenix, a mother, her child, and the quiet hum of an Arizona summer. But by noon, that silence turned into sirens. Lynandra Walton, 37, had lived most of her life on the edge. Court records describe her as a woman with a long history of arrests, drugs, DUI, resisting police, aggravated assault. Her name was already known to the Arizona Department of Child Safety. which had investigated her multiple times for drug abuse involving opiates, cocaine, THC, and methadone. She had already lost custody of 4 children. Still, in June 2023, she shared a small Phoenix apartment with her 15-month-old son, a boy born substance exposed, now learning to walk in a room littered with blue pills and burnt foil. On the morning of the 15th of June 2023, police say Walton woke briefly, saw her child awake, and went back to sleep. Hours later, she awoke to find him unresponsive. At 12:30 p.m., paramedics arrived to find her performing chest compressions. The toddler was rushed to Phoenix Children's Hospital, but it was too late. The medical examiner later confirmed the cause of death, fentanyl toxicity. Detectives entering the bedroom found the truth scattered across the floor: M30 stamped fentanyl pills, foil sheets burned from smoking, and a glass pipe beside baby toys and blankets. It was an environment of neglect and exposure, an investigator stated in court documents. A toxicology report confirmed both mother and child had fentanyl in their systems. When questioned, Walton appeared detached. She told police her son was healthy, but always getting into things. She admitted using fentanyl earlier that week, along with Xanax and marijuana, claiming she couldn't remember much from the days surrounding the incident. Detectives noted her inconsistent statements about how long she'd lived in the apartment and who the drugs belonged to. 1 year later, on the 27th of June 2024, she was arrested while leaving her Phoenix residence. Officers again found fentanyl and paraphernalia in her purse. She was charged with first-degree murder during the commission of a felony, child abuse, drug possession, and possession of paraphernalia, and is being held on $1 million bond. Prosecutors alleged that the child's death occurred while Walton was committing multiple felonies, making it a case of felony murder. In court, she appeared weary, wearing an orange jumpsuit, her expression unreadable. No family came to support her. The community's response was one of outrage and heartbreak, another child lost to a crisis that has gripped Arizona for years. Law enforcement called it a preventable tragedy, one echoing the growing epidemic of fentanyl exposure in American homes. From this case come sobering lessons. Addiction, untreated, consumes more than one life. Parental vigilance cannot exist alongside drug use, and every pill, no matter how small, carries the power to end innocence in an instant. The death of one child in Phoenix is not just a crime, it's a warning written in powder and pain. Evil doesn't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes, it sits across the dinner table or waits quietly in the next room. From jealousy that turned to murder, to addiction that stole innocent lives, Arizona's most dangerous women remind us that darkness often wears a familiar face. If these stories shook you, there's more waiting just beneath the surface: untold crimes, hidden confessions, and cases that still haunt investigators today. Subscribe to **Justice Reversed *** and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next episode. Because every week, we uncover the truth they tried to bury and the stories America can't look away from.